Safe and Sound Hillsborough was created in the summer of 2013 as an initiative to transform the way local policymakers address violence. This initiative shifts policy from a public safety to a public health model and aligns community and professional stakeholders to develop a comprehensive prevention and intervention approach. Safe and Sound Hillsborough is next on Bayside. Good morning and welcome to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelly Sanders. Like I said before, we're talking all about Safe and Sound Hillsborough. And what exactly does that mean? Well, I can't think of a better person to talk to about that than the Executive Director. That's Mr. Freddie Barton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I mean, maybe we've heard these words before, and it's maybe not registered. We've heard of the organization. I know I explained it in the open, but that's a lot to sort of take in and digest. So talk to me, Freddie. Tell me exactly what that means and how are policymakers looking and changing the way that we address violence?
Well, you know, Safe and Sound Hillsborough was started in 2013, and it was really done in response to the shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. When we saw what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary, it was a national wake-up call, but, you know, we've been trying to address the issues surrounding violence since, you know, the dawn of time, trying to figure out how can we stop it, how can we prevent it, how can we keep reduce it, and how do we make sure that it doesn't grow out of proportion. But Sandy Hook was different. When Sandy Hook happened, everyone looked to one another and said, we cannot allow this to happen. And so former County Commissioner Kevin Beckner pulled together an initial think tank of individuals representing public agencies, representing the private sector, and most importantly, representing the communities throughout Hillsborough County, and asked one simple question. What can we do to prevent Hillsborough County and the Tampa Bay area from becoming the next site of a large mass shooting? As we started to have those conversations, one of the things that came out was we can't predict the random shooter, but what we can do is look at what causes an individual to feel that there's no hope. What causes a person to feel that there's no path out, that there's no other solution to life's problems other than to pick up a firearm or pick up a weapon and to cause damage and destruction. And so we started to have these questions in this dialogue over the next 2 years, from 2013 to 2015, to really start addressing, instead of interrupting violence, but instead of doing that, to prevent it in the first place. Looking at how do we address workforce gaps? How do we make sure that mental health is brought to the forefront of every single conversation? How do we address substance abuse? How do we address parenting? How do we address the lack of social connectedness? How do we address gaps between law enforcement and community? How do we make sure that policies make sense for everyone and not just for one group of individuals? By addressing all of those things, we then can see the propensity for violence to decrease. And that's when we then formed ourselves as Safe and Sound Hillsborough. Initially, it was the Violence Prevention Collaborative of Hillsborough County, and we wanted to give ourselves a name that made sense. And what better way to do that than to say that we want all residents, especially our youth and families, to feel safe and sound as they go through. And so since then, we've kind of morphed into a public-private partnership, public-private and community partnership, where all the major public agencies of the county came together through an interlocal agreement and said that they would dedicate their resources, they would dedicate staff time, and they would most importantly dedicate their ability to affect policy changes to make sure that people felt safe in their communities. Knowing that we had to anchor that with the community, so we brought in community-based organizations, our faith-based partners, we talked to parents, we talked to residents, and now we're developing strategies to bring people together to find out what more is needed, and we operate several programs and initiatives throughout the county to reduce violence.
So this is really a collaborative issue with more than just the 3 offices that are represented today.
Absolutely.
This is a true, from this, if I'm understanding this correctly, a true community issue where it's obviously a community issue, but a community effort, bringing in all these different walks. And so that's a huge undertaking.
Right.
First of all, just in the initial statement, like, wow, that is a lot to address. In the initial stages, was that, I understand, I think, as probably anyone watching, if you were around during that time period, it was just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, and yes, no one wants to ever see this repeated again. So just in and of that scope of things, trying to figure out where do you begin and what do you do, and was that in the beginning stages surprising to find, oh, we scratched the surface and gosh, we got to go here and here and here and come together in so many more areas.
You know, Hillsborough County is over 1,000 square miles, so it's impossible to think that we can effectuate change all throughout the county all at one time. When Sandy Hook happened, everyone looked to one another and said, we have no idea where to start. But the power of Safe and Sound starts and lies with its leadership council. So when you look at the public agencies that are put together, it's the Board of County Commissioners that first came and brought this together. We have all three cities, the mayors and police chiefs of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, the state attorney's office, the public defender's office, the school district, the sheriff's office, the administrative office of the court, and the children's board. So when you look at that makeup, it's every single major agency that has their finger, and their pulse on what needs to happen from a policy perspective. But then we look at, you know, parents are saying, you know, we had Sandy Hook, we just had Parkland in Florida. And as a parent of two young men, I look and see, well, what more do we need to do? And it's really reaching out to the community. And that's really where the power and the bandwidth comes from. And so it's finding out, well, what else needs to happen in our communities? Our youth are now speaking out. Our youth are using their voices not to be marginalized, but to be a real stand on a vocal platform. And we're listening to them. We also know that there are several initiatives that we have to launch out. As we look at what happened in Parkland, we looked at what happened in Sandy Hook, we look at Oregon, we look at California, we look at all these things. Mental health is a major pressing issue. We have to look at programs that make sense. We have to look at addressing out-of-school time opportunities for our kids. We have to make sure that when kids are out of school, they have something positive to do. We have to make sure that all of our policies that are in place, that they're fair and equitable across the board. We have to make sure that there are opportunities for people to come together, to convene with one another, to address the issues that have divided us for years, and figure out a way to address those things. We do that through our community programs, our events that we put out together every single month. But again, with Hillsborough County being so large, we had to figure out, where do we start? So we used data indicators to define 4 major areas that we wanted to focus on. They're East Tampa, the University area, Plant City, and South County. The first question that we were asked was, well, why pick those 4 areas when there's so much that's happening in West Tampa? There's so much happening in Thenodosassa. You've got to go into Ruskin. You've got to go in these other areas. And the answer was, we had to start somewhere.
Sure.
And we picked the areas not just that had the most indicated violence, but also that didn't have it, but if we didn't address certain issues, that they could grow out. We treat this as a public health crisis, as a disease. And how do you treat a disease? You look at the symptoms. If you address those symptoms and the contributing factors, you contain it and you can reduce the ability for it to increase out of control. And that's what we're doing with several of our initiatives.
Wow. I commend you. That's a lot to tackle, but thank goodness that you're out there and you're trying to make Hillsborough a safer and more sound place to be.
That's right.
Very apropos. That's what you're looking at right there. safeandsoundhillsborough.org. Spell out "and" there. safeandsoundhillsborough.org. That's the website you were looking at. That's where you're going to find everything that we're talking about here today, and then some, even how you can get involved. All right, we are taking a break, so don't go anywhere. We're coming back after this. Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders. We've been talking all about Safe and Sound Hillsborough. And joining us now is State Attorney Andrew Warren. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Good morning, Shelley.
I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here and really elaborate on Safe and Sound Hillsborough. You know, as Freddie was talking about, this is a major undertaking. It's something that everyone out here watching, every one of us feel personally I know I can speak for everyone just because you hear these stories and they're happening time and time again. And I don't think there's a person out there that doesn't second saying, yes, something needs to be done. So thank goodness you're out there and you're making things happen.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, our mission is the safety of the community, and so we can keep the community safe in a variety of ways. And one of the ways we do that is through crime prevention. So Safe and Sound Hillsborough is a way for us to get involved in the community, help reduce violent crime, especially juvenile violent crime, before it happens, before people get into the system where then we later would have to prosecute them.
Sure, and no one to better speak on that than yourself. You've seen a lot of this happen. So where do you even begin? And from your perspective, and how is the state's attorney's office addressing this or approaching this? Or what is it that, from our viewers' perspective, what is it that the state's attorney's office is helping to do?
Well, I mean, just to put it in some context, the criminal justice is one of the most important functions of local government because it affects so many different people in so many different ways, starting with the safety of our kids, the safety of our neighborhoods. And historically, the criminal justice system has been a black box to a lot of people. They don't understand how decisions are made. We've been committed to transparency in how we make decisions and the policies that I've implemented, in how we handle cases. And that transparency builds trust. And that's why we're out in the community engaging with people so that they understand what we're doing to make the community safe, to promote justice and fairness. And Safe and Sound Hillsborough is just one other example of how the state attorney's office is out in the community doing that.
Sure. And I love how you said that because you're so right. It's the community, a lot of people, probably even on the majority speaking, would look at this, the law, so to speak, as in like, okay, it's very black and white, it's this or that, and it's very cold and not really, it doesn't really have a sense of feelings. And that is not the case. And bringing transparency, bringing all of this to light to where you're listening. And I love that. So you're out in the community. And how is it that are you having these meetings? Are you part of the Leadership Council meetings that take place?
So I'm on the Leadership Council for Safe and Sound Hillsborough, but in the 18 months that I've been in office, we've made a huge effort to be out in the community in a variety of ways, speaking to different groups, participating in community events in the criminal justice space. We partnered with different agencies this past weekend for a swim-a-thon at the YMCA to raise money to prevent kids from drowning. I mean, that's how we keep the community safe. So there are a lot of things that we can do in the criminal justice system, and it's not just the state attorney's office. It's so many partners, from our Sheriff Chronister and Hillsborough County Sheriff to Chief Dugan at Tampa Police, to all our local law enforcement partners, to the Public Defender's Office, to the courts, to organizations like Safe and Sound Hillsborough. Their mission is community safety, and that's what we're trying to do, and that manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
Sure. Now, what kind of results have you seen in your 18 months of experience with them?
Well, we've seen tremendous success in certain areas. We started a civil citation program for juveniles and adults that are keeping low-level offenders out of the criminal justice system, but still holding them accountable for what they're doing. We've taken a very aggressive approach on disarming domestic abusers and making sure that people who have lost their right to possess guns don't have them anymore. But the real success we're going to see in these programs is in the long run. These are not short-term fixes, and one of the problems with the criminal justice system has been its short-term focus. So organizations like Safe and Sound Hillsborough and a lot of the policies that we've implemented really do have that long-term focus. Let's see how much crime changes and how much we keep people out of the system and how much we make our neighborhood safer in the 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road and for an entire generation. That's our goal.
Fantastic. I love that too, that you're there. You're it's almost like, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're providing a voice. You're getting the feedback when you are doing these community events. You're out in the community talking to people, raising funds. That you're forward thinking in the planning aspect, like this is what we want to happen and this is our ultimate goal. Yet at the same time, you're so open-minded and available. I think that's an encouraging fact when you're talking about the citizens who may have those thoughts of, It's very black and white. You're unobtainable, and no one's really going to listen to the real community issues at hand. But you have these initiatives that you're starting, and that you're almost like the people's voice, so to speak, when you're coming to the round table, if you will.
Sure. Well, I think that's the exactly right word, is voice. I work for the residents of Hillsborough County, and what I found is that a lot of people have a lot of different ideas and concerns about the criminal justice system and about the safety of their neighborhoods. But so many people didn't have the opportunity to do this, to raise their hand and voice those concerns. And so the community engagement that we do through Safe and Sound Hillsborough, through other organizations and avenues, give people that voice.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, what would you like to see in a perfect world if there is an end to all this, God willing?
In a perfect world, I'd like to see no need for a state attorney to prosecute crime, no need for a public defender to represent criminals charged, because we don't have crime. Now, that's
Sure.
obviously never going to happen, but what we can do is take smart approaches to reducing crime,
Sure.
to make our community safer, to make the system more fair, to use taxpayer dollars more efficiently to accomplish those goals. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I know you at home are probably wanting more information, and that website right there will give you that information. safeandsoundhillsborough.org. That's where you're going to find all the information that Andrew Warren, our state attorney, has been talking about, and then some, even how you can get involved. So go check it out. We're taking a break. Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders. We've been talking all about Safe and Sound Hillsborough, and now we're hearing from Public Defender Julianne Holt. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Shelley.
All of you guys I know are so busy, and especially with this particular subject matter, I can't imagine even finding a free second in your day for personal life, much less coming on the show and enlighten us. So thank you for taking the time. From the Public Defender's Office, from their perspective, from your perspective, I know you've been with this initiative, with this organization since its inception. Talk to me about a little bit about the road to get here, and then where you're going, and what it means from your perspective.
Well, you know, for me, I'm very, very grateful to former Commissioner Kevin Beckner, because this was his idea. It was his idea to start this, and it was an opportunity for all of the community leaders to come together for a good cause. And coincidentally, as it relates to my office as the public defender, we're in a very unique position, because our focus was going to be violence prevention with our youth. And at the time, I had a significant number of cases that were pending in the office where, you know, your heart was just tugged at every single day, because you have clients as young as 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, or you have clients that are 15, 16 facing very serious charges. So the idea that we would all come together as leaders here in this community and start thinking about how can we prevent not only violence, but how can we impact the criminal justice system and truly address the issues that might bring people into the system. Sure. And when focusing with kids, you know, for me, it was a wonderful opportunity, because I'm in a unique position to know what the challenges are that our youth face, because when we're talking to them, one of the questions we talk to them about, why are we here? Sure. And so for me, it worked out great. It was a way to bring out these issues that were important. And when Freddie was talking to you about all the challenges and the public health model, and we were going to look at life differently. In other words, the quality of life, we're going to try to give everybody a good, even start in their life. We're going to try and focus on, for the first time, really focus on not only mental health being something that we talk about in the criminal justice system, but we're going to talk about it in the community. That's something that a lot of people don't like to do. Sure. We're going to go into the schools. We were going to have mock trials, for instance, in the schools and outside of the schools. We're going to teach kids in a very good way why violence is not good, why violence is a bad thing to have in our community, why it's not a good idea to have a gun. Because a lot of our kids were getting in trouble not knowing the consequences they were going to face. But what we discovered was these are good kids that where their life is, how their life is being lived out right now has basically given them almost no other choices. So when we can educate our kids and say to them, tell us what you need. You know what they want? Safe place to be in their community. They want no violence in their community themselves. They want to feel safe. They want to be able to depend on their community. They want a job. They want somewhere to go after school. Their desires are what we all want.
Absolutely.
But they haven't had it. And so this was a great way to bring all that forward.
Absolutely. They want to be safe and sound. I can't think of a better name for an organization than Safe and Sound Hillsborough. Now, you want more information on what we're talking about, perhaps you'd like to get involved, you've got some ideas, by all means, log on to safeandsoundhillsborough.org. That's the website. You go check it out. We're taking a short break, and we'll come back after this to wrap up this week's edition of Bayside. As always, I want to thank you at home for joining us this week on Bayside. Julianne, I appreciate you all coming here and enlightening us on Safe and Sound Hillsborough. And for you at home, I encourage you every week to get out, get involved in your community. This is important. Log on to safeandsoundhillsborough.org. That's the website. We'll have a link for you on ours. Go to their monthly meetings. If anything, go to the first one. Just see if this is for you. You can always volunteer. And of course, they'll accept financial donations if you don't have time.